Liberation War of 71. Two Class, Two Perspectives. Bulletin republished, number 8, April 2011. We got a lot to learn today. Bear with me. 40 years have passed since the Liberation War of 71. Conscious people with all political forces are renouncing the history of 71. Now the Awami League is in power, who claim to be the leading force in the Liberation War. So they are retelling their fabricated history to a large extent, where a large part of the intellectuals have joined. Therefore, it will be useful at this time to present some revisions and revelations of that history to the people, especially to the younger generation, and to try to establish the real truth. It would not be an exaggeration to say that the history of Liberation War of 71 is the biggest field of some of the distortions and lies that have been perpetrated in this country for the last 40 years. And the most important thing in this distorted history is the propaganda that the whole nation, except a few Razakars, was united in the single sense of nationalism of 71, and fought the War of Liberation under the leadership of Sheikh Mujib and the Awami League. In reality, there can be no greater lie than this. There was no doubt that the main political and organized force of the bourgeoisies in the War of Liberation of 71 was the Awami League, but there was no statistics how many different political forces were active in the Liberation War from their respective class positions and perspectives. Not only was the whole nation not united in the War of Liberation, but also it was not possible to unite them because of the imperialist, dependent, bourgeois character of the Awami politics. There was never been a single consciousness constructed on the sense of nationalism called the consciousness of 71. This consciousness is always divided, in many cases contradictory, different according to the class character. The first and most important division was between the anti-imperialist revolutionary leftist movement, known as the Maoist movement, representing the interests of the working peasant poor people, versus the bourgeois and emerging bourgeois class interests and the pro-imperialist Awami leadership movement. These were the two main perspectives that came directly from the two opposite classes. But even within the movement of the Awami leadership itself, there was a wide and many kinds of divisions. The nationalist and reformist left, with Maulana Bassani as a kind of omnipotent representative, had a wide differences with the Awami Liberation War, and those who were known as the pro-Moscow leftists sided with Awami League were another trend. In addition, there were thousands of divisions in the official politics of the Awami League. Since the assassinations of Sheikh Mujib, the Awami League leadership has claimed that Mustaq, the foreign minister in the expatriate Awami government, had brought a compromised policy with Pakistan in collision with the United States. There was a conflict led by Awami League with the freedom fighters who left the rebel army. There were also various grouping lobbying within the Awami League which came from various political differences in watching and conducting the Liberation War. With the exception of the first difference mentioned above, although the rest did not emerge so openly in a short period of time, it started to have an effect even during the War of Liberation. Even on the battlefield, if the war had been prolonged a little, it would have been clear that the Liberation War of 71 had a different perspective and different politics and positions. There is no doubt that all of the above have fought against the invading fascist Pakistani army, more or less, but they did it for different political purposes. During the War of Liberation in 1971, this abundance of multiple political streams was created due to the main bourgeois power, Awami League, not having any social economic program for its own independence and independent country. Even the individual Sheikh Mujib's own program was a mystery. It can be understood from this information that he did not take part in the Liberation War, consciously to say. An extremely strong attempt has been made by the ruling class of Bangladesh, its state, and its party since 71, to remove the various political programs and trends that were active in the War of Liberation. Naturally, the bourgeois intellectuals and the educated middle class who have failed to contemplate the boundaries of this political ideology have joined this effort without realizing it. In the War of Liberation, Different political ideologies, different classes of politics and views of these classes were developed. The predominant spirit of propagating and believing that the role of the program of the Awami League was the hope and aspirations of the whole nation. The leader of bourgeois politics during the War of Liberation is the most serious misleading or false propaganda. Although the workers, peasants, and even the revolutionary middle class of this country have been heavily immersed in Awami League politics, it is also true that a large part of them were out of its influence. Different types of liberation war have been going on since 71 through different revolutionary parties or middle-class nationalist left politics and leadership. Usually, the history narrated by the bourgeoisie, its state, and its intellectuals on the multiple issues of 71 is partial, fragmented, confusing, and full of lies. It is the work of a desperate researcher to uncover the truth by removing the stones of confusion and falsehood, as well as to analyze the revolutionary political outlook. We would try to publish some basic and brief assessments of history through a few articles on the occasion of the 40th anniversary of the Liberation War, so that the new generation in particular can get some help in positioning themselves in the right direction in evaluating the past history. The point of entry into this context is to understand that the events and history of 71 clearly have two classes: bourgeois on the one hand, and what is embodied through revolutionary labor politics on the other, and two opposing positions. There are countless issues of controversy and disagreement. Numerous accurate information has been suppressed, and history has been horribly distorted. This distortion is most done by those who blame others for the perpetual distortion of history, and our middle class and bourgeois intellectuals have taken them in stride. They are writing book after book, writing article after article, writing fictional war stories, and by doing all this, they have given a big layer of lies among the young and the educated people. It is not possible to remove it with some insignificant articles. It involves the strengthening of a revolutionary movement, when the workers and peasants, as well as the general middle class, will awaken themselves to struggle by organizing themselves in a classically correct political view, become self-educated, and then will be able to realize the bourgeois lies through their own struggle. However, for the formation of that awareness, awakening, and organization, it is also necessary to widespread the truth in the conscious and disillusioned circles, which in turn will lead many progressive humanitarian intellectuals to uncover the truth and take this work forward. It is worth mentioning here that the immense heroism, courage, and self-sacrifice of the people of this country during the period of genocide in 71, led by the Pakistani army and Razakars, opportunism, and deceptions of the bourgeois leadership in the face of boundless torture and uncertainty, have completely gone astray, and the general population can contemplate this situation. As they have seen, their fortunes have not changed. The bourgeois rulers, the state, and the intellectuals want to cover up the fact by saying if it isn't enough that we have got a land, a country, a flag, and national anthem of our own. In fact, these were also available during the Pakistani period, but why did people come out of it? Because these flags and music have not changed their destiny. Of course, the fate of some people also changed for good during the Pakistani period, as it did in Bangladesh, at best 10% of the people. Those who are more accountable want to show, has not there been much improvement in 40 years? In this context that they are asked, haven't this country rigorously developed so much during the British and Pakistani rule? What would they say? In fact, people do not eat this development. Luck has definitely favored 5 to 10% of the population in this improvement. The others are still in the darkness. From this, the question arises that if the Bengali rising bourgeoisie and bourgeoisie of 71 had waged a real liberation war, then why would it be so? Apart from the flag and the change of the nationality of the rulers, in what other way has the fate of the people of this country changed since the days of Pakistan? The answer is that this class did not want a war of liberation. They had no preparation for it. They were bound to go into this war, and what they did by going to war was not a real war of liberation. They did not liberate the country. They did not free the country. That is why the People's Liberation War has failed. To learn more, follow us on social media. Give us a share as well, because then we could be able to promote more of our work, because a lot of this history is not known. Lal Maurice, we work with people in Bangladesh, so a lot of this information we're getting directly from people out in the struggles out there. La salam, y'all.